Hey everyone, welcome back to Love Bite. I want to start today by asking you to picture a very specific, but probably entirely familiar scenario.
Oh, I think I know where this is going.
You probably do. So you're sitting on your couch, it's like 11:30 at night, and your phone screen is just illuminating the dark room.
Right.
And you are in the absolute thick of a brand new connection. You've been texting this person for 3 days straight, the banter is sharp, the responses are instant.
The dopamine is just flowing.
Exactly. Every time that little notification bubble pops up, you feel this literal physical jolt in your chest. You're already constructing an entire future in your head.
Well, yeah, we've all been there.
But then a week goes by, and the replies start taking 4 hours, then 8 hours, then a full day.
Yeah, the slow fade.
The messages get shorter, and then the ultimate modern vanishing act, the ghosting. You are just left staring at a read receipt, completely bewildered.
It's brutal.
It is. And you're asking yourself, why does it feel like people get attached so intensely and so quickly today, only to lose interest even faster?
It's a phenomenon that leaves a lot of people feeling, honestly, not just rejected, but genuinely unmoored. It feels like emotional whiplash
Emotional whiplash is the perfect term for it.
because you're operating under this assumption that a really fast, intense connection implies a deep, lasting connection.
Right. You think it means something real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when it just evaporates overnight, it forces this kind of cognitive dissonance that is incredibly draining.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this deep dive to tearing that whole dynamic apart. We are going to decode this modern epidemic of fleeting romance.
And it really is an epidemic.
It really is. So are people actually losing interest, or is there some fundamental glitch in how we are pursuing connection from the very beginning?
That's the million-dollar question.
To answer it, we're pulling from a really dynamic stack of sources today. We'll be looking at the deep neurochemistry of love outlined in the Journal of Psychiatry, plus some sociological research from Erasmus University.
Yeah, they did a fantastic study on how Gen Z interacts with dating apps.
Super interesting stuff. We're also looking at some groundbreaking psychological field work from the 1970s on romantic obsession and modern clinical studies on vulnerability and attachment.
And I think it's important to mention that our objective here isn't to just sit around and lament the death of romance.
Right. We're not just shaking our fists at smartphones.
Exactly. The goal is empowerment through understanding. When you begin to unpack the actual biological mechanisms in your brain and how specific technologies are actively exploiting those mechanisms.
You can stop internalizing the fade out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can stop blaming yourself when someone ghosts you because you'll understand the invisible machinery that drove them away.
Okay, let's unpack this machinery. Because my instinct is to immediately blame the culture, to say, dating apps ruined everything.
It's an easy scapegoat.
Right, but before we look at the screens in our hands, we have to look at the biology in our heads.
We really do.
We have to answer a really tough foundational question. When someone loses interest in 3 weeks, were they ever actually experiencing love to begin with?
In the vast majority of these rapid burnout cases, no. They really weren't.
Wait, really? Not at all.
Not true love, no. What we casually refer to as falling in love is very frequently a profound misinterpretation of our own neurochemistry.
Okay, so what's actually happening then?
Well, to understand the mechanics of this, we have to look at Dr. Sahab Udin's research in the Journal of Psychiatry.
Right, he maps out romantic love in phases, doesn't he?
Yes. He doesn't view it as a single emotion, but as a progression through 3 biologically distinct phases: lust, attraction, and attachment.
Okay.
And the crucial thing to understand here is that your brain uses entirely different chemical cocktails for each of those phases.
I want to focus heavily on that second phase, attraction, because lust is fairly straightforward, right?
Yeah, that's driven by testosterone and estrogen. It's just the evolutionary imperative to reproduce.
But attraction seems to be where the chaos really begins. According to the research, this phase is governed by monoamine neurotransmitters.
Right, so we're talking about dopamine, epinephrine, and serotonin.
Walk me through what is actually happening in the brain when these chemicals flood the system. Let's start with dopamine.
So dopamine is the primary driver of that intense early-stage fixation. In pop culture, we call dopamine the pleasure chemical.
Which feels good, obviously.
It does, but neurobiologically, calling it just pleasure isn't quite accurate. Dopamine doesn't just make you feel good, it makes you want things. It makes you seek.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is the chemical of motivation, craving, and a mechanism called incentive salience.
Incentive salience. Okay, I read about this in addiction literature. It basically means your brain flags a specific object or person as a high-value reward.
Yeah, exactly. And it pushes everything else into the background.
It acts like a motivational magnet.
That's a great way to visualize it. It isn't just that you find the new person pleasant to be around. It's that your dopamine pathways are literally altering your perception of your environment.
So they suddenly seem like the most important thing in the world.
Yes, highlighting this person as vital to your survival and well-being, you feel a total compulsion to pursue them.
And then you combine that with epinephrine, right, which is adrenaline.
Right, which gets your heart racing, your palms sweating. It creates that physical nervous energy when they text you.
But the serotonin piece is what really caught my eye in the Journal of Psychiatry source.
The serotonin drop is fascinating.
Yeah, because while dopamine and adrenaline are spiking, your serotonin levels actually plummet. Why does that matter so much?
It matters immensely because serotonin regulates mood, stability, and intrusive thoughts.
Okay.
When we look at brain scans of people in the early, frantic stages of attraction, their serotonin depletion closely mirrors the brain chemistry of patients with obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Wait, really? OCD.
Yes, literally.
So that feeling of not being able to stop thinking about someone, rereading their texts 50 times, analyzing the punctuation.
That's not you being romantic. That's a literal, measurable drop in the chemical that usually prevents obsessive thought loops.
Oh, wow. So your brain is temporarily lacking the chemical breaks needed to stop fixating.
Exactly. So you have this triad. Dopamine is driving relentless pursuit, epinephrine is creating physical anxiety, and low serotonin is locking you into an obsessive thought loop.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Biologically, this state is almost indistinguishable from a behavioral addiction.
That feels like a massive reframing of the whole honeymoon phase. We celebrate that manic energy in movies and songs, but biologically, it's a state of high stress and cognitive impairment.
It really is a stress response.
Which perfectly bridges us to the work of psychologist Dorothy Tenoff. She did this massive research project back in the 1970s, interviewing over 500 people about their romantic lives.
Her work is foundational here.
And she coined a term for this exact biological and psychological state. She called it limerence.
Right. Tenoff realized that society lumps a lot of very different experiences under the umbrella of love.
Which makes things confusing.
Extremely confusing.
Yeah.
But through her interviews, she identified that 50 to 60% of people experience this highly volatile, specific cognitive state that is entirely distinct from mature, secure love.
And that's limerence.
Yes, limerence is characterized by an intrusive, all-consuming obsession with another person, whom she clinically termed the limerent object, or ILO.
I have to push back a little here, though, for the sake of the listener. Aren't we just pathologizing a normal crush?
I can see why it sounds like that.
Because everyone gets butterflies, right?
Yeah.
Everyone daydreams about the person they just started dating. At what point does a standard issue crush cross the line into clinical limerence?
The differentiator is the scale the cognitive takeover and the absolute dependency on the other person's behavior for your own emotional regulation.
Okay, so it's about control.
Right. A crush might be a pleasant distraction. Limerence hijacks your executive functioning. In Tenoff's data, subjects at the peak of limerence reported spending anywhere from 85% to nearly 100% of their waking hours, with the limerent object occupying their thoughts.
100% of your waking hours. I mean, that doesn't sound like love. That sounds like a hostage situation in your own mind.
It can be agonizing. Tenoff documented incredible testimonies. There's a particular interview with a 28-year-old truck driver that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, I remember reading about him in the source.
Yeah, he didn't describe his feelings for his LO using words like beautiful or joyful. He described his time around her as being crippled by stage fright.
Stage fright.
Yes. He was terrified, acutely aware of his own clumsiness, constantly calculating every single word he said because he felt that one wrong move would result in total emotional annihilation.
That is fascinating, and it points to something deeply uncomfortable. If he's terrified, that means this entire state is rooted in fear. It's not about making the other person happy. It's about securing his own emotional safety.
That's the core mechanism of limerence. It requires uncertainty to survive.
Wait, it needs uncertainty.
Yes. Tenoff theorized that limerence is sustained by intermittent reinforcement. You need hope that the person desires you, combined with a pervasive, agonizing uncertainty that they might not.
Oh, like a slot machine. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
Precisely. If they text you, the dopamine hits and you are euphoric. If they pull away, you plunge into despair.
So if the uncertainty resolves, like if they actually turn around and say, I am 100% committed to you, I love you, you are safe, what happens to the limerence?
In many cases, it evaporates.
Just vanishes.
Yeah, the biological engine of limerence runs on the anxiety of the chase. Once the target is secured, the anxiety drops, the dopamine levels out, and the person experiencing limerence suddenly feels a profound sense of emptiness.
Wow.
They look at their partner and think, I don't feel that intense spark anymore. I must have lost interest.
Which is completely backwards. They didn't lose interest in the person, they just metabolized the anxiety.
Exactly. But they interpret it as falling out of love.
But during that limerent high, we do something else that sets us up for an inevitable crash. Tanoff borrowed a concept from a 19th century French writer, Stendhal, called crystallization.
Oh, I love this analogy.
I want to spend some time on this because it might be the most important concept we discuss today. Let's break down Stendhal's metaphor.
It's brilliant. So he suggested that if you take a dead bare branch from a forest and throw it into the depths of a salt mine in Salzburg and leave it there for a few months.
Okay, a dead branch in a salt mine.
Right. When you pull it out, that dead wood is entirely coated in glittering, shimmering salt crystals. It looks like a diamond branch. It is breathtakingly beautiful.
But underneath.
Underneath that spectacular exterior, it is still just a piece of dead wood.
So in the context of dating, the bare branch is just a regular, flawed human being that you matched with on an app or met at a bar.
Yes. And the salt crystals are the projections, your limerent brain layers over them.
Because you don't actually know them yet.
Exactly. Because you don't know this person, your brain fills in the gaps of your knowledge with idealized fantasies. You project your deepest desires, your unmet needs, and your romantic ideals onto a total stranger.
I see people do this constantly, especially with red flags.
Oh, especially with red flags.
You meet someone who is notoriously emotionally unavailable. They take 3 days to text back, they avoid deep conversations. That's the bare branch.
Right.
But instead of seeing that reality, you crystallize it. You tell yourself, oh, they aren't ignoring me, they just have a deeply complex, guarded soul. And I am the only one who can understand their mysterious depths.
Yes. You are actively ignoring the reality of the person to preserve the fantasy of the crystals.
It's pure delusion.
It is. And here is the brutal truth about crystallization. It is inherently unsustainable. You cannot maintain a relationship with a projection.
Right, because eventually reality sets in.
Eventually, the friction of daily life, a disagreement, a bad habit, a moment of selfishness knocks the crystals off. The illusion shatters. You see the bare branch for what it is.
And that is the exact moment the fade-out happens. That is when someone loses interest so fast.
They wake up.
They didn't fall out of love with you. They woke up from their own neurochemical hallucination.
That's a great way to put it.
So taking all of this into account, the dopamine, the low serotonin, the limerence, the crystallization, we have a biological baseline that proves human beings are naturally vulnerable to chasing unpredictable highs and projecting fantasies onto strangers.
That's always been true, historically.
Right. But I want to pivot now, because if our brains are this susceptible to the anxiety of the chase, what happens when we introduce modern dating apps into the equation?
Well, you create an environment perfectly engineered to exploit that biological vulnerability on a mass scale.
A perfect storm.
Truly. To explore this, we have to dig into the sociological research from Erasmus University on Gen Z's relationship with dating apps.
Yeah, the researchers use a foundational framework from sociologist Zygmunt Bauman, specifically his theory of liquid love. Let's unpack that term, liquid love.
Sure. So the implication is that love used to be solid. Historically, relationships were tethered to geography, community, and necessity.
You met someone in your town, your families knew each other.
Right. You built a life based on shared survival and community integration. That was the solid state. It was difficult to break, bound by immense social friction.
But now?
Bauman argues that in our modern, hyper-individualized, consumer-driven society, those bonds have melted. Relationships are now liquid.
Meaning they flow easily.
They flow easily, they change shape rapidly, and they evaporate without a trace.
Yeah.
We've begun to view romantic partners not as collaborators in a community, but as consumer goods.
A product to be evaluated, consumed, and discarded when a newer model is released.
Sadly, yes.
The Erasmus thesis cites a researcher named De Ritter who calls this the datafication of intimacy. We are taking the incredibly complex, messy reality of human compatibility and reducing it to a UI interface.
It's wild when you think about it.
We are swiping on a 2D image, a height statistic, and a carefully curated Spotify playlist, and asking an algorithm to calculate a romantic destiny.
And the apps sell this as ultimate freedom. They offer unprecedented convenience and access to thousands of people outside your immediate physical circle.
But there's a catch.
A huge one. That infinite access triggers a massive psychological hurdle that actively prevents connection. The IJFMR study we were pulling from details this extensively. It's the paradox of choice.
The paradox of choice is something I think everyone intuitively understands, even if they don't know the formal term.
How would you explain it?
I'll give you a non-dating example. Think about how we consume media. You sit down on a Friday night, exhausted from work, and you open Netflix. You have access to practically every movie ever made.
Right. Endless options.
You scroll through the action category. You scroll through documentaries. You watch 3 seconds of a trailer, decide it's not perfect, and go back to scrolling. 45 minutes later, your pizza is cold, you are overwhelmed, and you just turn the TV off and go to sleep.
It is the exact same psychological mechanism. The paradox of choice dictates that as the number of options increases, the perceived value of any single option decreases.
And the anxiety of making the wrong choice skyrockets.
Exactly. So when you apply that to dating apps, the results are deeply destructive to intimacy.
Because if you have thousands of potential matches in your pocket, why would you ever settle? If the person you're on a date with chews a little too loudly or makes a joke that falls flat, you don't push through that minor friction.
You just bail.
The subconscious thought is always humming, I don't have to deal with this. There is a flawless, crystallized version of a person waiting for me just one swipe away.
So effort is entirely replaced by options.
Wow. Effort replaced by options.
In solid love, you had to do the hard work of resolving conflict because your options were limited. In liquid love, conflict resolution is deemed inefficient. You just unmatch and re-roll the dice.
That is so bleak.
But the Erasmus University study uncovered a layer to this that is even more insidious than just avoiding conflict. They interviewed Gen Z users about their actual motivations for opening the apps.
Oh, this part blew me away.
And a dominant theme emerged: validation seeking versus disillusionment.
Right. The subjects openly admitted that a huge percentage of the time they aren't opening Tinder or Bumble to find a date or even to hook up.
No, they were opening the apps strictly for micro-validations.
Let's connect that back to the dopamine pathways we discussed earlier. They're using the app as a slot machine. They swipe, the screen lights up with a match, and they get a microdose of dopamine and an ego boost.
The app provides a momentary confirmation that they are attractive and desired by the tribe.
But it's a hollow victory. They are essentially mining other human beings for dopamine hits. And what happens next is what the thesis calls swiping fatigue.
Because that micro-validation is entirely disconnected from genuine human interaction, it doesn't sustain them. It's empty calories.
So they get the match, the dopamine spikes, and then
they realize they actually have to talk to this person. They have to
Yeah.
compose a message. They have to perform.
And because they were only there for the validation in the first place, that feels like an exhausting chore.
So they just close the app. The other person is ghosted before the conversation even begins.
It's a closed-loop system of commodified emotional life. You swipe until you are numb, you hoard matches like digital trading cards, and you feel more isolated than when you started.
It's a vicious cycle.
But let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say you defeat the paradox of choice. You get a match, you don't succumb to swiping fatigue, and you actually start messaging this person with a genuine intent to connect.
Okay, best case scenario.
Why do so many of these interactions still fizzle out within a week or two?
Well, to answer that, we have to look at the Durji Park study on vulnerability and authentic connection. We've established that the initial connection on an app is inherently surface level. It's just data points. To transition from a data point to a real human bond requires bridging a massive gap, and the only bridge that exists is vulnerability.
And we live in a culture that treats vulnerability like a biological threat.
We really do.
Let's truly break down what that Durji Park study is saying. Vulnerability isn't just about sharing a sad story, right?
Not at all. It's the fundamental willingness to let someone see your inner world without knowing how they will react. It requires taking the mask off.
And doing that triggers some of the most difficult emotions the human nervous system can process: fear, shame, and the terror of inadequacy.
Evolutionarily speaking, social rejection was a death sentence. If the tribe cast you out, you died. So our nervous systems are highly attuned to protect us from rejection.
That makes sense.
To avoid that risk, modern dating culture has constructed elaborate defense mechanisms. The primary one is cultivating an aura of detached, effortless cool.
Right, caring too much, texting back too quickly, or expressing genuine enthusiasm is framed as a weakness. It's a loss of leverage.
Exactly. Whoever cares less wins.
That's the toxic undercurrent of modern dating advice.
But the Durgee Park study makes a very clinical point about this. If you engage in this defensive, surface-level interaction, your connection is structurally fragile.
Because it's not real.
Right? If you only present a curated avatar of yourself, and they only present their avatar, you aren't actually connecting. And it is incredibly easy for the human brain to discard an avatar.
There is no moral weight to ghosting a profile. There is only moral weight in ghosting a person.
Which brings us to the medium through which these avatars attempt to communicate texting.
Oh boy, texting.
The Gen Z digital intimacy thesis specifically highlights asynchronous communication as a massive barrier to intimacy. Users in the study describe texting as emotional labor.
I want to dig into why it feels like labor. We are more technologically connected than at any point in human history, yet we are complaining that sending a text message is exhausting. Why?
It's a biological mismatch.
Exactly, because text-based courting lacks all the physical cues. It strips away tone of voice, facial microexpressions, body language, and shared physical environment.
Which are the very cues our brains use to establish safety and trust.
It forces you to try and build intimacy in a vacuum. And when the brain lacks context, what does it do? It projects.
Big time. Let's say you send a vulnerable text. You take a risk. 2 hours go by with no response.
Your brain, already primed by the anxiety of the limerent phase, does not assume the person is just in a meeting.
Oh, absolutely not. The brain assumes total catastrophic failure. They think I'm needy. They are laughing at me. I shouldn't have sent that.
You just spiral. And then 3 hours later, they reply with a single word. Cool. Just cool with a period.
And suddenly you are analyzing the punctuation. Why the period? Are they mad? Is cool sarcastic?
You build an entire fictional narrative about this person's emotional state based on 4 pixels on a screen.
And this leads to massive misinterpretations. By the time you actually meet up for a date, the real breathing human being sitting across from you cannot possibly align with the highly edited, crystallized projection you've spent the last 2 weeks arguing with in your head.
The Durgee Park study breaks this down further into 2 types of interactions: conditional versus unconditional self-disclosure. I think understanding the difference here is vital for anyone listening who feels stuck in these dead-end text threads.
Conditional self-disclosure is a defensive transaction. It's a negotiation of risk.
What does that look like in practice?
It operates on the premise: I will only reveal something true about myself if you reveal something first, or if I am absolutely guaranteed that you will react favorably.
It's testing the waters. Like, I'll make a self-deprecating joke, and if they laugh, maybe I'll share a real insecurity. It's protecting the ego at all costs.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But unconditional disclosure is what actually builds the bridge. It involves taking an emotional risk.
Which is terrifying.
It is. It means stating your needs, sharing a fear, or expressing genuine interest without demanding a guarantee of a specific response. You share it simply because you want to be authentically known.
But because we are exhausted by the paradox of choice, burned out from swiping, and terrified of the asynchronous void of texting, almost no one is willing to take that emotional risk early on.
So the conversations stay locked in this polite, superficial banter.
The banter becomes tedious, the text thread feels like a chore, and eventually someone just stops replying. The interest fades because there was no emotional anchor to hold it in place.
Exactly. The connection starves to death from a lack of vulnerability.
But let's look at the best case scenario again. Let's assume a couple navigates all of this successfully. They beat the algorithm, they meet up, they have great chemistry, they actually practice unconditional vulnerability, and they start dating.
Okay, they've made it past the initial hurdles.
Why do we see such a massive drop-off rate, a sudden loss of interest around the 3 to 6 month mark?
This is the critical transition zone. And to understand why relationships die here, we have to return to the biology of the brain, specifically how it transitions out of that initial limerence phase.
When you hit that 3 to 6 month mark, the dynamic naturally shifts. The psychological framework here is habituation, which is detailed extensively in the research by Aaron and Aaron.
Habituation is a universal law of the nervous system. The brain is designed to adapt to repeated stimuli so it can conserve energy and focus on new threats or rewards.
Like how you don't feel your clothes on your body after you put them on.
Yes, or why the 10th bite of a decadent chocolate cake doesn't trigger the same explosive dopamine release as the very first bite.
So apply that to a relationship. In the first month, just hearing their name gives you a dopamine spike, but by month 4, they've become predictable.
Right, the uncertainty that fueled the limerence is gone. You know they are going to text you good morning, you know their political views, you know their childhood stories. The element of danger and unpredictability vanishes.
And as a direct physiological result, the dopamine drops. The epinephrine drops. Your heart rate literally slows down when you are around them. You feel a sense of safety.
Now, historically, this was a beautiful transition.
But today, we have a massive societal complication, which is detailed in Owen Stoneking's analysis of modern attention spans.
Yes, the TikTokification of the brain.
Stoneking points out that modern individuals are marinated in high-intensity, rapid-fire dopamine from the moment they wake up.
Constantly.
We have algorithms designed to serve us a novel, highly engaging piece of video content every 15 seconds. We have endless streaming, push notifications, a 24-hour outrage news cycle.
Our nervous systems have been trained to expect constant, relentless spikes of stimulation.
Because of this constant bombardment, our baseline threshold for boredom is artificially unprecedentedly high. We require massive amounts of novelty just to feel a baseline level of normal.
So what happens when a brain with a blown-out dopamine receptor enters the calm, predictable stage of a healthy relationship?
I'm guessing a tragic misinterpretation occurs.
A huge one. The individual feels their anxiety fade, they feel the obsession lifting, and they notice the manic high is gone. But because their threshold for stimulation is so skewed, they don't recognize this calm as security.
They interpret it as a failure of the relationship. They think, the spark is gone, I'm bored, this must not be the one.
They mistake peace for boredom. They mistake the absence of anxiety for a lack of chemistry.
So they self-sabotage. They pick a fight, or they pull away, or they break it off entirely, re-download Hinge, and go looking for the next hit of early-stage limerence.
They are walking away right at the exact moment a real, sustainable bond was trying to form.
They are fleeing the transition into the third biological phase of love attachment.
The Journal of Psychiatry provides a fascinating biological model for this transition through the study of prairie voles.
I love this study. So scientists looked at the brains of prairie voles compared to montane voles, and they are genetically very similar, right?
Very similar. But prairie voles are unique in the animal kingdom because they are one of the very few mammalian species that form lifelong monogamous pair bonds. Montane voles, on the other hand, are completely promiscuous and don't form bonds.
So what was the chemical difference?
The researchers found that moving past the initial mating phase, which is driven by dopamine in both species, requires the brain to shift reliance to an entirely different set of neurochemicals to sustain the relationship.
Specifically, oxytocin and vasopressin, the chemicals of connection.
Let's break down what these actually do in the body, because it's not about feeling high. Oxytocin, for instance, actively inhibits the release of corticoids, which are stress hormones.
Oh, wow. So while dopamine makes you frantic and energized, oxytocin literally chemically suppresses your anxiety. It creates a feeling of deep, quiet safety.
And vasopressin is heavily linked to vigilance, protective behaviors, and maintaining lasting promise. In the lab, when scientists chemically blocked the oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in prairie voles, something crazy happened. The voles still mated. The dopamine was still working, but they completely lost the ability to form a long-term bond. They mated and moved on, exactly like the montane voles.
Which is an incredible metaphor for modern dating. By constantly chasing the high of the apps, the validation, and the limerence, we are functionally acting like we have our oxytocin receptors blocked.
We really are. We are so addicted to the dopamine phase that we never stick around long enough for the oxytocin and vasopressin to actually synthesize and do their jobs.
Because those chemicals do not hit you like a lightning bolt. They require time, physical proximity, shared experiences, and consistency to build up in your system.
The tragedy of the modern dating cycle is that the relentless pursuit of the spark actively prevents the formation of the bond. You cannot have the manic excitement of discovery and the deep peace of knowing someone simultaneously. They are biologically distinct states.
So, this brings us to the most practical part of our deep dive. If you are listening to this and realizing you've been caught in this cycle-mistaking anxiety for chemistry, abandoning relationships at the habituation drop-off, or getting burned out by the apps, how do you break it?
How do you distinguish between a temporary neurochemical illusion and real sustainable love.
Exactly.
We could look to the philosopher and psychoanalyst Erich Fromm for a brilliant framework here. In his classic work, The Art of Loving, Fromm draws a sharp, unforgiving distinction between what he calls immature love and mature love.
Okay, what's immature love?
The fundamental operating principle of immature love is, I love you because I need you.
Let's translate that into the modern context we've just built. I love you because I need you means I need you to text me back so my anxiety subsides. I need you to match with me so I feel attractive. I need you to trigger my dopamine so I don't feel bored.
I need you to fill this void in my own self-worth. It treats the other person not as a human, but as a biological utility.
It's a transaction based entirely on dependency and deficit.
It is entirely self-centered, even if it feels romantically obsessive. Mature love, on the other hand, Fromm argues, operates on the inverse principle. I need you because I love you.
Wow. I need you because I love you?
It is not driven by a frantic need to soothe anxiety. It is a conscious, deliberate choice. It involves seeing the other person clearly, seeing the bare branch without the salt crystals.
Acknowledging their flaws, their humanity, and choosing to care for their growth anyway?
And building that mature love requires establishing what the attached Bookie PDF refers to as a secure base. I think this is the antidote to the liquid love of the dating apps.
How does the research define a secure base?
Individuals with secure attachment styles do not chase the extreme highs and agonizing lows of limerence. In fact, if they meet someone who is hot and cold, or who plays games with their response times, a secure person finds that behavior exhausting and off-putting, not intoxicating.
They look for partners who reciprocate their ability to be consistently responsive and available. They don't want the roller coaster.
Right. If a secure person sends a text and doesn't hear back for 4 hours, their brain doesn't plummet into low serotonin OCD thought loops. They don't construct a narrative of rejection.
They just assume the person is busy at work because they have built a foundation of trust.
A secure base fosters an environment where unconditional vulnerability is actually safe. Both partners can share their inner worlds without the constant, looming threat of the fade-out.
But establishing this requires you to radically shift how you evaluate potential partners. You have to stop evaluating them based on how much anxiety and excitement they provoke and start evaluating them based on their capacity for consistency.
And the research actually suggests that how we meet people plays a significant role in our ability to build that secure base.
I want to circle back to the IJFMR study we mentioned earlier. They compared the relationship satisfaction of dating app users to individuals who met their partners through traditional offline methods.
Like through friends, at work, at a hobby group, or in their local community.
Right. The data showed that the offline couples often experience significantly greater long-term relational fulfillment. Now, why is that? It's not because people who don't use apps are inherently better partners.
No, it's because the offline environment naturally bypasses the most toxic elements of the digital architecture we've discussed. When you meet someone through a shared community space, you completely neutralize the paradox of choice.
You don't have a menu of thousands of other faces in your pocket demanding your attention. You are focused on the person standing in front of you.
You also bypass the emotional labor and massive misinterpretation of asynchronous texting. You share a physical context. You see the body language. You hear the tone of their voice.
The environment itself demands a more authentic, less disposable interaction.
Most importantly, offline interactions naturally disrupt the crystallization process. When you meet someone in the real world, you see them interact with the waiter. You see how they handle a minor inconvenience.
You see their awkwardness and their reality before your brain has a chance to coat them in the salt crystals of a digital fantasy. You are grounding the connection in reality from day one.
You're building on solid ground instead of liquid.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of territory today, digging into the deep structures of our neurobiology, the sociological shifts of modern romance, and the psychological traps of digital intimacy.
It's a lot to process.
It is. Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked to answer our core mission. Why do people lose interest so fast today?
They lose interest quickly because they are fundamentally misunderstanding the assignment. They are mistaking the dopamine addiction, the low serotonin, and the sheer anxiety of limerence for true love.
When the anxiety naturally fades, they assume the love has faded.
They are losing interest because they are paralyzed by the paradox of infinite choice presented by dating apps, treating human beings as disposable commodities.
They are starved for connection, but terrified of the unconditional vulnerability required to achieve it, opting instead to interact as guarded digital avatars.
And tragically, They are misinterpreting the natural, peaceful, biological transition into oxytocin-based attachment as boredom.
The ultimate takeaway here is a call to shift your perspective. We have to stop glorifying the manic intensity of the beginning. Understand that your biology is wired to crave the unpredictable high, but your long-term psychological fulfillment relies entirely on stability.
Don't chase temporary excitement. Choose something real, even if it feels slower, even if it requires patience.
Real feelings, real bonds are not downloaded instantly through a screen. They grow slowly through consistency, shared physical experiences, and the courage of vulnerable action.
It requires recognizing that the spark is often just a symptom of a highly stimulated nervous system, not a measure of romantic destiny.
I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Think back to that intense, heart-racing butterfly feeling you get when a new connection is forming, the feeling we've been culturally conditioned by movies and music to chase our entire lives.
And the feeling everyone wants.
Right, what if that feeling isn't romance at all? What if that fluttering in your stomach is actually just your body's physiological stress response to uncertainty, danger, and anxiety?
That changes everything.
Next time you meet someone and you feel totally calm around them, no fireworks, no manic energy, no frantic checking of your phone, don't walk away thinking there's no chemistry.
Definitely not.
Consider the profound possibility that your nervous system might finally be telling you that you found something real, something safe, and something worth staying for. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take your time out there, protect your peace, and build something real.